What's going on, my name is Eason, and welcome back to another video. Today we're beginning to challenges of contemporary agriculture. So previously, we've talked about effects of contemporary agriculture and of agriculture as a whole. We went into pollution, the use of pesticides, and all that stuff. So now we're getting into those challenges. What debates, discussions have been brought up about these agricultural practices? How hard has it been to feed the growing population? What about food deserts where nutrients aren't easily accessible? How's the economy affected by this? How are the farmers being treated and are affected by this? Are they getting treated fairly by the companies? Are they getting money? Is the government not implementing laws that make it easier to farm? Is the government implementing laws that make it easier to farm? We're going to get all into that stuff in this video, starting with discussions and debates. Let's go. So, agricultural innovations have raised debates over sustainability. How safe is it for the environment and the ecosystems? Soil and water usage. Is the soil getting salt in it? Is it keeping its fertility? Is its fertility lasting longer? Or is it losing fertility quicker? We need to avoid it losing its fertility quicker. What about water? Is it being polluted? How much water is being used? Is it being irrigated from a natural water boundary? What is the water even going for? Reductions in biodiversity. How many animals and plants are going extinct or we're seeing less of because we're focusing on certain crops, maybe through monocropping? And then extensive fertilizer and pesticide use. How much fertilizers are you using that are man-made? So what effects can we see on the crops there? How much human health can there be that has been changed? Pesticides. How are the animals being affected by this? How are other wildlife, not just animals, being affected by this? As well as human health okay with this? Is the environment good? Going back to sustainability. So those are the main debates that you need to know about agricultural innovations. Now let's get into some more debates about agricultural practices like monocropping, which is growing the same crop on your farm year after year. You're not changing it throughout the year like on a seasonal basis. That's monoculture. But monocropping, you're growing the same crop, let's say wheat, every year, and you're not changing it at all. Monocropping can lead to a loss of soil fertility. You're using that same crop. There's no diversity of plants being grown in the soil, so it's going to lose its fertility. And debates have been brought up as whether this should be used or not. GMOs, which can lead to a loss of biodiversity and human health problems. Remember, GMOs are changing the DNA and genetic material of a plant. So what if we're losing traits and stuff? Can this be harming the environment? And what about human health? Are we being negatively affected by this? Is this harming our growth and hormones? Aquaculture, which is like collecting seafood and stuff. What about animal waste? How is that being built up? Is that harming us and the ocean? We need those plants and animals to live in the ocean for us to eat. So is animal waste killing it? Do we need to find another way of using aquaculture? And then irrigation, which is depletion of water, is an effect in that. So do we need to stop irrigating certain places? Do we need to just not irrigate at all, use natural water? That may make agriculture harder, but we need to also think about the people who live in that area, what the water is used for besides irrigation. We're going to get into an example of irrigation in just a second with the Aral Sea. So before we even read that excerpt on the left, look at the picture from 1960 of the sea, and look at the picture of the present of the sea. You might be asking what sea in the present photo. Well, if you look on the left, that's about all that's left. So this is pretty much the Aral Sea. It's all dried up because of irrigation policies that the Soviet Union implemented beginning in about 1960s. They did this because of crop production increase. They saw a chance for them to get wealthier by selling crops, exporting them, and they all right, guys, we're just going to irrigate some water from the lake. However, they irrigated more water that's being irrigated than being put back through rainfall and other ways. So the sea has been draining, and this sea has been home to animals. We're seeing a loss of biodiversity to that. We're seeing, less water that can be used for us humans. Now, I just talked about some effects, but let's go into some other ones. So, loss of biodiversity, we just talked about. So, animals that live there don't live anymore. Their traits are no more. A lower growing season. This may be a little bit surprising, but there's going to be a lower growing season because of the lack of water now. They're using less water, this is going to be less growing. Decline in freshwater resources. Because we drain the water, there's no fresh water left, so that's going to make it a little harder to get resources. And then we're going to see a decrease in fishing. So since we see less animals in the water, like fish, there's going to be less fishing over there, and those fishermen are going to be out of jobs, and that part of the economy is going to go down a little bit. And yeah, that was the irrigation stuff of Aral Seas. Now let's get into patterns of food production and consumption. And these are influenced by movements relating to individual food choice, such as urban farming, community-supported agriculture, organic farming, value-added specialty crops, fair trade, and local food movements / dietary changes. I want to go into all these concepts individually so you can master them and understand them thoroughly. So let's start it with urban farming, which is a leisure activity primarily that can create health problems from dirty water. I know, starting with the negative at the start. But problems from dirty water, where's the water coming from when you're doing urban farming? There's a bunch of cities, not many lakes. I mean, New York City, we have the Hudson, but that's not the cleanest body of water either. It could also create health problems from contaminated food. So not just from the water, but from, how you're treating it, what fertilizer you're using, the rain, other weather and stuff, animals, all of that. We can see here in the picture that they're on the top of the roof. Not really any boundaries or structure to help prevent contamination from, let's say, bird droppings. That could be a big one. There's a bunch of pigeons in the city. Now, there's also fresh food for those in need. They're growing food, and then a lot of the times they're giving it to those in need. There's a big homeless and food desert population in urban areas, and many people grow food, fresh food in urban areas to feed those who need it. It also creates a more sustainable city. They're not doing harmful agricultural practices. They're not slash and burning. They're not terribly irrigating the area, the Aral Sea, not that affected because of urban farming. And they're creating, a more sustainable city. The environment is being treated well. And there's also a generating of income. They're selling these crops maybe to farmers markets or other events and festivities, so they can earn a little bit of income from this. Now remember that this is primarily a leisure activity. And then one more thing we got to go over is not reduce biodiversity. They're not taking land, especially in this image that's already there. There's a building there, and they're just using what they have, the building roof, to plant stuff. They're not removing just life that's already there to plant their stuff. Now let's get into community-supported agriculture, which is basically agriculture in which consumers buy food from crops on a consistent basis, and these are usually in local areas. And this has effects like reducing pollution, sustainable farming practices. They don't have to slash and burn. This also encourages communication between the farmer and the consumers. And then there's local economic growth. They're earning money from these people buying their crops on a consistent basis. They don't have to worry about paying rent and buying fertilizer and stuff. So community-supported agriculture is a pretty good thing. And then one more thing to go over is healthy lifestyles and promotions of healthy lifestyles. So if Billy is buying fresh tomatoes from a farmer down the road, and his friends see him eating those tomatoes, they may be like, oh wow, healthy food, that must be good. So they might want to eat food and buy food from that farmer or other farmers who grow fresh tomatoes as well. Now let's get into organic farming. So all natural farming with no biochemicals or artificial practices. I didn't put animations here for a reason, because organic farming, of course, has a lot of good stuff with it. So there's not really any negatives either. So this is in demand because of crops don't cause preventable diseases and other health issues. So we're not seeing issues like heart attacks and diabetes arise with organic farming. Remember, this is all natural. Nothing man-made, nothing artificial. There's less environmental damage. We're not seeing desertification or loss of soil fertility or animals getting sick and dying out because, fertilizer and pesticides and stuff. So the environment is pretty much being helped for this. Then, of course, there's crops are healthier when grown. They're not jacked up on steroids. They're not, have a bunch of chemicals in them that can make them, not, good. And overall, they're healthier and better for you. And this also builds soil fertility. The soil is not being affected in any way besides its natural course. And this builds up over time. Of course, over time, this will also decrease. But Typically, we're not harming the soil with adding artificial soil or pesticides that can decrease fertility. And then, of course, we're promoting biodiversity. We're not using anything man-made, so we're using the natural stuff. We're using the bio-life that's already given, the diversity that we have. And then we have local food movements, which are movements for certain foods that have been seen around the world. As we can see in this image, this is a vegetarian movement. And these people are telling people it's a movement to stop killing animals for meat and protein and to eat them. This movement is there for certain foods, meat, and we can see this around the world and not just in a certain area. I've seen this here in the United States. I'm sure it's in China, India, United Kingdom, a bunch of states around the world. It's not, let's say Oregon, where it's not in just California. It's not in just France. It's an opinion that's supported around the world. Of course, more in certain areas, and of course, they're not saying all food is bad. They're specifically going after meats for their area, not the whole world either. And then we see dietary changes. So as countries develop, the more there is in changes in their diets. And we see this because of a more variety of food, access to foods. So we see an increase in gluten-free diets. We see wheat being decreased in our consumption patterns. There's also a decrease in demand for red meat. So we see more chicken being bought and consumed. There's also an increase in demand for, I like to call fake milk, like almond milk, coconut milk. It's not dairy. It doesn't come from a cow. And then, of course, we see an increase in oils and fats. We got over these, positive. I mean, they're kind of neutral. But then we see oils and fats. And yeah, we're going to definitely see this more. Have you seen a lot of butter in your food? Have you seen a lot of oil in your food? You go to a pizza like Domino's or Papa John's, you're going to see oils and stuff in your food. It makes it, taste sweeter and stuff. And, of course, it makes the food, easier to cook with. And then let's go into feeding a global population. The population is increasing. There's no surprise with that. And there's been some challenges of feeding a global population, like lack of food access. We see this with food deserts. Problems with distribution systems. So is the food being transported thoroughly? Is it being transported in an efficient amount of time so it doesn't spoil? Adverse weather conditions can influence if food gets anywhere. Hurricanes could cause detours. Fires can burn up food. Tornadoes, you know what tornadoes can do. Land loss, we see this with erosion and weathering as well, or just, deforestation, desertification, and loss of soil fertility, soil salinization. So let's get started with food deserts. We're going to go into all those concepts individually as well. So food deserts are areas where there is limited access to healthy food and a decrease in access to supermarkets due to reasons like transportation and location. So they may not be able to afford a car. They may not have a car. The supermarkets may be farther away. You could be in a dispersed settlement, remember 5.2, and there may be a supermarket farther away. So it's going to be harder to get your nutrients. So because of this, people are going to buy food from the local areas like convenience stores or fast food restaurants like McDonald's. And they're only doing this because it's available. And we know at these convenience stores or fast food restaurants, nutrients is limited. McDonald's isn't necessarily the healthiest place to eat. And those who live in food deserts are at higher risk for preventable diseases like diabetes, and then stroke and heart attack are also two that are good to know as well, because they're not getting their nutrients. They may be getting their calorie intake, but they're not getting the healthy stuff that they need to have. So they're going to be seeing high amount of salts, maybe carbohydrates, and then of course sugar. And these are caused, type 2 diabetes, heart failure. And these can be prevented by having your fresh foods and nutrients. And here we see on a map where food deserts are primarily located. And we see these a lot in the southeast region of the United States. Especially in rural areas, actually, like Mississippi, Alabama, and Louisiana. There's not really that many cities in Louisiana. We see Shreveport, Monroe, and Baton Rouge, and New Orleans. And we can see that food deserts are all over. And then we see in Mississippi, I think the only city I can think of there is Jackson. And then Alabama, we see, there's a decent amount of cities there, and we don't see as many food deserts around Alabama, but we do see a lot there. And we're going to actually see a lot of food deserts near our urban areas as well. And then, of course, we see this in our eastern area as we get up north as well. And we see some areas in the western area with Arizona and New Mexico having some food deserts. So yeah, this is kind of a good area to know. Look at the dispersed area in the northwestern region. There's not many food deserts there, especially in that northeastern region in New England, so like Maine, Connecticut, New York, Massachusetts, Rhode Island. Not many food deserts either. We primarily see that in the south. And remember, food deserts are like, okay, do they have access to nutrients? Is there a supermarket nearby? Do they have a car to get there? Now let's get to problems with distribution systems. So lack of infrastructure means more food spoiling. Do we have refrigeration to keep milk cold? Do we have areas to keep food from, not expiring, that they're not exposed to anything? Lack of transportation makes food harder to get to the markets. They need to get there somehow. Government policies can make restrictions of food. They can actually do the opposite as well. But we've been seeing more, restrictions on food. How much food can be grown? How much food can be sold? Not can be sold. It can be sold. How do you have to grow your food? What pesticides can you use? What are illegal? How much pesticides and fertilizers can you use? All of that stuff. How much acreage could you own with a certain license? Do you need a license to own animals? All these policies can create restrictions on getting food and crops. Then we see lack of finance makes it harder to distribute and grow crops. If you don't have the money to grow the crops, you're not going to grow it and make money and distribute it to feed the global population. It's very simple. Now let's get to adverse weather, which is a pretty simple topic. Natural disasters have been known to destroy crops, and we're going to get to a few examples of these, like droughts, wildfires, freezes, and hurricanes. Yeah, making sure there's no more. But droughts, there's no water. They can't they can't give water to the crops for them to grow. Wildfires will burn them up. We saw this in the United States in that western area and Australia. Freezes, it's freezing the crops. They dead. They're too cold. Hurricanes can destroy the crops, give them too much water, actually, and cause mud issues, and of course, kill the crops with too much water. I know that's the saying. Drinking too much water for yourself can actually drown your kidneys, and that's a bad thing as well. And then we see land loss, which urbanization and development lose farming land and decrease physiological density, which also decreases agricultural density. If you don't remember these concepts from Unit 2, physiological density is the amount of people per arable land, and then agricultural density is the amount of farmers per arable land. And urbanization and development decrease that. Development causes urbanization, or development leads to urbanization, or urbanization leads to development. It's kind of a win-win situation, circle. But these decrease that, and these create land loss. And these also create displaced farmers. And they live in these urban areas that are being created on their farmland. They're not moving to other areas with the arable land to continue the way of life. So they're going to just be, all right, the area is being developed. We're just going to have to deal with it. They'll get jobs in the factories or other urban opportunities as well. Land closer to farmers are also going to be more intensive and expensive. So if they see urbanization in certain areas, their farming is going to be more intensive because there's going to be less land access, and they, mechanization can't be used as much because there's they don't need it as well. It's also going to be very expensive. Land closer to the markets where the people are is going to be more expensive. The farther away you get, the less expensive it's going to be. It's just, it's the bid rent theory. All right, now we're going to get into food production practices. So the following have an economic influence, remember, economic, on these practices. So economies of scale, if you remember, are where the production costs are decreasing. However, output is increasing. Distribution systems, how are they being distributed? By train, by car, by plane? How much is this costing us? Government policies. How much money do I have to put into this? How much taxes is the government taking? Location of markets. How much money am I going to make since the markets are close to me? The farther they are away, the less I'm going to get, because the more it's going to cost for me to transport them. So they all have an economic influence on food production practices. And then, of course, we see location of food processing facilities. So food processing, the more there is, the more expensive it's going to be. And then food processing could lead to inflation in food, more food prices going up, and all that. Hey, and is that the end of the video? Yes, that's the end of the video. Thank you so much for watching. There's the scale check on the screen. It's an FRQ and FRQ style format. Yes, every FRQ on the 2021 AP exam is 7 parts. So do this, try to complete it under 25 minutes. Subscribe to the channel if you're new. It's free. It really does help me out. Like the video, also does the same. You're going to join my Discord server. Yeah, you just hang out there, I guess. Learn something new, teach other people new things, talk, play games, all that cool stuff. Leave a comment or criticism. I love criticism, and yeah. That's all I got for you. I got more AP Human videos as well on my channel, so go check those out. Adios.